on.
Well, welcome and greetings, fellow seekers, to the Balanced Purpose podcast, where we seek to traverse topics with both balance and purpose. Right, so
Purpose, yeah.
purpose.
The balanced purpose dance. Let's do the shuffle as well.
I was just trying to work out, is this you trying to juggle priorities in your life, or are you pulling melons again?
Tonic stuff.
And once you balance things, you get a grip on things too. So, there we go.
Speaking of getting grip.
Speaking of getting a grip.
Today's topic will be on the subject of control.
Yes, control. Yes. Yes. Touchy topic, no pun intended. But it's, come on, if you're out of touch, you're out of control, right? So, but no, we need to control the situation.
Yeah, I'm lost in this. I lost control of this. Yeah, totally. Out of control. Okay, get a grip.
But look, it's a new year. It's a new year, and I'd like to think that it's a new opportunity maybe to get some control on lives that feel like they're spiraling out a bit. Yeah, perhaps so. How's 2021?
2021. Are we in more control this year than we are the last? I don't know how things have been progressing since the last time we caught up. The UK is out of control right now with virus strains flying around and all that stuff. Whereas New Zealand here is a lot more in control of the situation, so to speak. We almost had a faultless summer so far. It's quite amazing how things have panned out quite differently for New Zealand, considering that we, probably tried to implement a lot of control features early on in the game. I won't say it's a game, but in the situation. It is an important theme, when it comes with regards to masculinity. We hear that we want our leaders to be in control. The trusted leaders. We also hear from time to time some women remark, "Oh, they want the lovers to be in control of the situation." When we hear comments like that, and then it begs the question: what do we mean by control in this situation? And then on the other side, we also talk about control freaks, and I do confess of being a control freak. In fact, I'm so aware about that I have to make conscious efforts to relinquish control sometimes, like going with the flow. But like too much on the other side, where you go with the flow all the time, you're just going to be out of control. You're just going to be too influenced by the environment out around you, and maybe you just become this wind, this leaf in the wind, and just float around and da. There's nothing wrong with that from time to time, but I think when it comes to the masculine perspective, where you're driven to a particular purpose, a direction, a mission, you kind of have to be somewhat in control of that situation. Now, with every plan, there's this classic graph. We want to start from here, we want up here, and we think it's going to be like straight line, but really, life happens, and you end up going, and maybe you end up here.
Yes,
but it takes all
kinds of tangents,
and all kinds of tangents. So where does control come into this? Is it control of the outcome? Is it control of the process? And what part of the process are you in control with? I think that's that has been misunderstood to a large extent.
Absolutely.
Does this, how does this sit with you? So for what I've mentioned.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting, isn't it, that actually control seems to somehow be related to freedom, which in a way seems like an opposing force. And yet, to be in control of a situation means that you are free to do as you please in a situation. Think about it. So, for example, if I say that I am free to walk in the streets, it means that actually I'm in control of my senses and bodily movements, so I'm not, my arms are just flailing around randomly, and, my legs touch a jelly, there is certain, eye coordination that happens when I walk out the door, I got to make sure that I go down the steps carefully. All that's being in control. And yet that gives me a sense of freedom because it allows me to navigate the landscape, right? So perhaps this is something we do wrestle with, that in the desire to be as free as possible, we try and control situations as much as possible, including controlling outcomes. This is something that I grapple with a lot, and I've shared this with you before. The anxieties that I live with. A lot of anxiety has to do with one's fears and worries and concerns about the future, and not being able to be in control of that. It's feeling like that a situation could possibly unravel in many different ways. So how do we rein that in, perhaps? And not being able to do that perhaps starts to niggle and gnaw away at your sense of self, your sense of masculinity, and all those things. So, yeah.
Yeah. One thing that you mentioned that really landed for me was autonomy or independence, around those words. Freedom.
Yes.
Yeah, so to me, freedom, autonomy, independence, it's a very important part about self-determination. And I think that's an important part of how we assert control, because to me, I understand masculine energy to be a very much a self-directed, independent energy where, I'm in charge of myself and in my realm, so to speak. And everyone gets blessed, when the cup overflows as a result of that. So I want to be in control of being abundant. I want to provide. But the freedom is such an important part of distinguishing yourself, your sense of identity, away from the larger group. I know as humans we are also quite complex because we want to fit in, but I think within the group that we belong in, we also want a certain sense of ourselves. And I feel it's similar to how we regard relationships or even teams. In a team, we are very much, together. We're part of a belonging. But even within that, you need the autonomy of different team members to synchronize and coexist and have some sort of synergy. But the beauty of the teamwork is that we have our autonomy within that. So we bring our individual skills and talents and offerings, which has to be unique and has to have its own. We have to have our own freedom within that. And the thing that I'm kind of going back towards in my thinking process right now is how much control is associated with the self. Control is associated with your own identity and your own uniqueness, your own fundamental difference from people as well. And that means the ability to make choices, to decide on where you want to go and how you want to respond to things, situations. I get a sense that what in the end the true control actually is control of self. Not and then we conflate it with the idea of I need to control my environment. I think when we are outward focused, we want to project onto the environment. We want to control the factors around us. We want to make sure people aren't stepping in line. I think that's a breeding ground for like a toxic leadership, so to speak. where people get labeled as control freaks because you're feeling, controlled by someone else. If I do recall, Viktor Frankl's quote, the very, very famous quote, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in this space lies your ability to make a choice of how you're going to respond to this. And the response is the control that you have, ultimate control that you have. And I don't think he says this out of willy-nilly. I think he really meant to say that ultimate control is control of self.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So when you put it like this, it suggests then that control actually is about management. It's about mastery, even about or over. So, for example, you think about say in a sporting context, if you have control of a game, it means that you have mastery over how you want to deal with your opponent. So it doesn't mean that you're going to determine the outcome. It just means that you are able to navigate the process with skill and with mastery. And that is what control and self-control is about, really.
I love that. Yeah, it's control the process, as you say. It's control of, despite the outcome, you're going to still maintain your equilibrium. So you're not trying to control the external forces or the external outcomes, which you have no control over, really. But if you can control your peace of mind through this process, then it just might mean that you've controlled the situation. When I compare the differences between I think back in the 80s, where some of the bosses depicted on TV are like almost yelly and they lose their temper and they're cool. I'm just not thinking of a particular example right now. Versus you think about, I think the main actor from Sopranos, or like the Robert De Niro kind of character, where they're so measured, and they don't have to say very much. They don't lose their cool, but they command so much mana because they're so in control of themselves. And it just highlights the thing of the more you try to control your environment or people, the less respect you're going to get. But the more in control of yourself that you have, the more people are going to holy shit, I'm gonna respond to this guy. This guy has the power and mana of the situation because he's so in control of himself. And that relates to the confidence there's exerting. So confidence and control is very much intertwined when we consider that focus on the self, self-confidence and self-control. I think that's a interesting way to tie it together.
A certain degree of control actually has to be directed and exerted towards yourself too. And perhaps this is what you're indicating, that it's really, and ultimately, if we focus our energy so much on controlling things externally, we get frustrated. Whereas if we direct it towards ourselves primarily, it gives us perhaps a base or a foundation to work on in terms of how we then respond to the world around us, perhaps in a more calm manner. So, for example, if we have a certain control or mastery over our emotions and we don't let, say, anger or whatever get the better of us, then we're better able to deal with external situations, directions of other people, situations being triggered or whatever. So if we've learned how to control our emotions first, then we are able to better control emotions that arise in other contexts. So.
I think it can be infectious. In fact, when someone shows that I'm in control of the situation, I'm not reacting. I'm not reacting. In fact, that's very much what meditation teaches us, at least from the Vipassana school. You're not reacting. You're in control. Wow. equanimity. In a way, that leads to mind control, like self-mind control. It's a kind of self-hypnosis, really, or practice for that. So I can see how it ties in all together like that. But then the practical application of control is that it's interesting to see it from the point of view that this control can be asserted or not, simply whether you want to activate it by choice or not. I feel because it's a personal control, and it's your own state of mind that you're trying to control. So the environment can make it difficult for sure. But ultimately, to know that actually the ultimate free will that we have, or at least in my opinion, is that we have the free will to choose whether we want to assert this mind control over and the piece of the state of our mind over ourselves, or you want to relinquish the control and be swung by the environmental factors that determine how we should be feeling. So we can be affected by environment, we can be affected by a noisy neighbor or something, or we can be so in control of our mind to go, doesn't affect me. I think that's like a real high level meditation. And when I think about it, it's like that.
Absolutely.
I think it's the Vietnam War or something that's very famous. A photograph of a monk who protested. I think even Rage Against the Machine used that for their album cover.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I was just about to say, so it's on their debut album, and it was actually a Vietnamese monk protesting the Vietnam War, actually.
Yeah.
So he was protesting the American occupation, and he chose self-immolation as a form of protest, and it's incredible, really, because he essentially got him into a lotus position. You know, he doused himself petrol, he lit it, and he just sat there, and he literally just burned to death while remaining completely still. And I mean, it's just unfathomable how he's able to perhaps pull this off. But I guess when you reach a really high level of meditative practice, you have really mastered the ability to even tune out pain entirely, which is really a high level form of control. After training, but that's incredible, and this, I guess, also shows what you can achieve, perhaps when you put your mind to something which involves control, but also when you attain a certain flow state, and perhaps actually this is quite second nature to you, isn't it, Fabian? Because you have a certain mastery in the Tai Chi practice, if you like, and when you're in that state of flow, actually, you don't necessarily think about your movements. You kind of just let it be, because you've already entered the state of equilibrium, if you like, with yourself.
I like to think that. yeah, sure. What he said. What he said. I would like to think that I can see where you're leading with your explanation about that. Yeah, for sure. You know, I want to like modestly say that, you know, I'm not a master just yet in Tai Chi, but I can, but I can understand the kind of flow you're talking about, and that's maybe the kind of goal that I'm trying to achieve, or the flow state. The tenet of Tai Chi is very much to relinquish excessive control over your environment. So it actually does teach a good lesson that, you know, we want to be in control of your balance, your stance, your form. You want to be in control where you can control your body, but but you're also subject to understanding, because it's a duality kind of like yin yang kind of like philosophy. It's also acknowledging the other parts that you cannot control, and that's the energy of the form, for example, or the energy that's surrounding you that naturally pushes you in the direction where it 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 makes it look like you're like seaweed in the sea, floating around like that, and that's why it looks very gentle. But there's a lot of internal control. That's the thing. So there's a lot of internal control where you direct your chi, and how you flow, and how you allow the flow to happen. So it looks essentially balancing control and lack of control, yielding versus control. It is part of the efficiency of energy that gets cultivated as a result of yielding. Basically, yielding is one of the core tenet of Tai Chi as a martial art. So how can you yield, conserve your energy, but gain the advantage as a result? Control yourself. Control yourself and your ability to exert energy. So don't put energy where you don't need to put it. Let's just say if you compare a hard martial art like Kung Fu versus Tai Chi, and you're fighting Kung Fu, you're probably going to exert a lot of energy to kick and punch. You're going to last, like, maybe, if you're really, really fit, maybe up to half an hour non-stop. And at some point you end up panting. But if a Tai Chi practitioner were to get into combat, let's just say, because it's counterintuitive to know yielding, actually it's a higher practice as a result. But if a Tai Chi master can actually practice it effectively, you can go twice or three times as long as a Kung Fu practitioner, because you're not expending energy uselessly. Gotcha. The difficulty is training to do that takes way longer than our natural instinct to use our energy on stuff. In a way, Tao philosophy starts to retrain the mind around that, but in the form of balance. Like, knowing what you can control and knowing what you can't control, and yielding to what you cannot control. So it takes a lot of self-awareness for that.
Sure. And a lot of fine-tuning as well. Yeah.
A lot of fine-tuning. That's why Tai Chi is such a hard practice. As a philosophy, I think it works better as philosophy than actual, like, street fight kind of stuff, for example. So I would use Tai Chi more in terms of how I approach like work situations. Like, I apply the philosophies of Tai Chi into daily life, for instance, or like if I were to do an errand, for example, I'll probably find 2 or 3 different things I can do at the same time while I'm doing the errand. Like if I go to the mall, for example, to buy something, I'll make sure I've got like 3 things to do before I go to the mall. Then, or if I want to do the dishes or the gardening, I'll make sure I'm on my audiobook and listening to something while I'm doing something else. So I'm trying to achieve more in an efficient way as a result. So applying Tai Chi in that sort of way feels more appropriate to me than a street fight. Yeah. And I'm just bringing back to the idea of like what can I control within my situation, and how can I best use the situation for efficiency's sake. Right. Yeah. I think the theme is still the same. we're really about it's all really about self-control. And when we lose a sense of self-control, that's where we fall out of balance about things. That's where addictions come. And it can be any sort of addictions, I believe. It's losing control of self. So I feel that it's important for men to assert things like discipline, because it's a form of a practice of control. It's a practice of mind control, self-control, to not give in to certain like core desires that don't serve us. But as a result, we can progress in our purpose, our mission, way more effectively.
Yes. I think what you spoke about there regarding self-control being a discipline, I think it's a really insightful one. So if control is a discipline, it's also an art, because every art, every skill requires mastery, it requires fine-tuning, it requires cultivation, as you've mentioned. And I like the analogy of cultivation, actually, because if you think of, say, well, you know this better than I do, because you are adept at gardening and so forth, and so you understand that to nurture, say, a plant into full growth and full health, you have to cultivate it, and you're going to provide it with the right conditions, the right nutrients and so forth, the right amount of care. But it's also all about getting it right. It's not about overstepping it, and not about depriving it either. Right? It's about, again, finding the right balance. And so efficiency actually is about balance, because it's about expending the right kind of energy to the right kinds of pursuits, and not wasting them on purposeless or mindless pursuits. So it's about giving the right kinds of fucks, if you like, giving the right kinds of fucks to the right kinds of things, and giving zero fucks to the things that fuck with you. And so, right? And so that essentially is, there's a lot of expletives in one sentence, but essentially, right? It means that you have to trim the fat. So ultimately, perhaps it's like thinking about it as picking your battles. You can't possibly control every aspect of your life. Choose the ones that work for you, and just really focus on them, and getting grips on things.
Now, the final parting word I would say is, we're all doing all these practices, meditation, Tai Chi, whatever, even your martial art or game, sports, even sometimes, or mastery of anything. It's really all about a practice towards achieving mind control, quieting the mind, and as a result, we can be more at peace with our lives. I think peace is the ultimate goal, and how we do it is through our minds.
And it's a one step at a time process, but the more we cultivate the habit of being in self-control, I guess the closer we get to attaining our goals.
Including no fat pay.
Including no fat. Oh yeah. Yes, that is really next level control, isn't it?
Don't touch it. Don't touch it.
Yes. Let's take control of this episode, and we should really wrap things up here. So thank you one and all for tuning in, and
lasting this long in the conversation. It's good self-control. Not to turn this off.
Exactly. And now we encourage you to exercise a bit of control over your index finger, and you hit the like and the subscribe and the share and the comment as well. You're down there, all right? And we'll catch you on the next episode. Yeah, all right.
Hey.
Peace and love and all that jazz. Yeah, all right. Boom.
Peace.
We out. So what's been in control? What's been out of control in your life? Back at you already.
Put me on the spot, bro. And I'm just thinking about getting grips on things right now.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you're gonna edit out. But,